simple, while pouring vintage wine for his boss. He laughed when she fumbled with the silverware, apologizing to his guests for his wife's lack of breeding. Richard Sterling truly believed he was the prize in their marriage. He thought Isabella was just a nobody, a quiet girl from the countryside he had rescued from obscurity. He loved the way she made him feel powerful. But Richard made a fatal miscalculation. He didn't know that the woman quietly enduring his insults wasn't a nobody. She was the estranged heiress to the Kensington dynasty, a family so powerful they didn't just buy companies. They bought countries. And tonight, just as Richard is about to humiliate her one last time, a fleet of black Rolls-Royces is turning onto their street. The king is coming for his daughter, and Richard Sterling is about to learn that some silences are not weakness. They are a warning. The aroma of rosemary roasted lamb filled the modern minimalist kitchen of the house in the suburbs of Connecticut. It was a nice house, a status symbol. Not a mansion, but the kind of four-bedroom colonial that screamed upper-middle management on the rise. Isabella Sterling wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She had been cooking since 6 in the morning. Every vegetable was julienned to perfection. The silver was polished until it mirrored her exhausted expression. She checked the vintage of the wine, a 2015 Chateau Margaux that Richard had insisted on. It cost more than her first car, but Richard said it was necessary. "Isabella!" The voice came from the living room, sharp and impatient. Richard walked in, adjusting his silk tie in the reflection of the microwave. He was a handsome man objectively. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of jawline that suited a boardroom. But his eyes were always scanning, always calculating the worth of everything around him, including his wife. "Is the sauce reduced? Mr. Halloway is very particular about consistency," Richard said, not looking at her but rather at the shine on his Italian leather shoes. "It's perfect, Richard. Just like you asked," Isabella said softly, turning down the heat. "I used the recipe from that chef in Paris you like." Richard scoffed, a short, dismissive sound. "Let's hope you didn't botch it. You know you have a tendency to over-season. Just try to fade into the background tonight." "All right, Halloway is considering me for the senior partner position. This dinner is the final test. I need everything to look sophisticated." He walked over to her, reaching out as if to touch her cheek, but instead he picked a stray lint off her shoulder. "And change that dress," he added, his voice dropping to a patronizing whisper. "It looks domestic. Wear the black one I bought you. The one that makes you look like you actually belong in this tax bracket." Isabella felt the familiar sting in her chest, a cold weight she had carried for 3 years. When they had met, Richard had been charming, ambitious, and seemingly kind. But as his career at Sterling and Vance Global skyrocketed, his respect for her had plummeted. To him, she was the girl from nowhere. She had told him she was an orphan raised by a strict grandmother in rural England, cut off from any family money. It was a half-truth, a necessary lie to escape a life she hadn't wanted. "I'll change," Isabella said, her voice steady. "But Richard, please, don't make jokes about my education tonight. Not in front of them." Richard laughed, checking his Rolex Submariner. "Oh, Bella, don't be so sensitive. I'm just managing expectations. If they know you're simple, they won't judge you when you can't keep up with the conversation about the market or politics. I'm doing you a favor." The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, demanding sound. Richard's face transformed instantly. The sneer vanished, replaced by a winning, eager smile. He pointed a finger at her. "Wine. Now. And don't spill it." As he rushed to the door, Isabella looked down at her trembling hands. She took a deep breath, centering herself. She remembered the lessons her grandmother, the Duchess Beatrice Kensington, had drilled into her since birth. A queen does not scream, Isabella. A queen endures until she strikes. She untied her apron. It was going to be a long night. The dining room was dimly lit, illuminated by the expensive crystal chandelier Richard had gone into debt to purchase. Seated around the mahogany table were the people Richard desperately wanted to impress. There was Arthur Halloway, the CEO of the firm, a man with cold gray eyes who looked at people as if they were assets on a spreadsheet. Next to him was his wife, Evelyn, a woman dripping in diamonds who had already critiqued Isabella's curtains twice. Then there was Brad and Jessica, Richard's rival colleague and his social climbing wife. "So, Richard," Arthur Halloway said, swirling the Chateau Margaux in his glass. "This quarter's numbers were impressive. You've got a killer instinct. We need that in the London office." Richard beamed, leaning forward. "Thank you, Arthur. I believe in total dedication. If you want success, you have to cut the dead weight and focus on quality, in business and in life." Isabella entered the room carrying the heavy platter of roast lamb. The smell was divine, rich with garlic and rosemary. She moved with a natural grace, a silent elegance that went unnoticed by the table, except perhaps by Arthur Halloway, who watched her with a curious frown. "Here we are," Isabella said softly, placing the platter down. "Finally." Richard sighed, rolling his eyes theatrically for his guests. "I thought you'd gotten lost in the pantry, Bella, though to be fair, the map to the kitchen is the only one she can read." Brad and Jessica chuckled. Evelyn Halloway offered a pitying smile. "Now, Richard," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "don't be mean. The lamb looks delicious. Did you make this yourself, dear? Or did you have it catered?" "I made it," Isabella said, taking her seat at the far end of the table. "Bella is quite the homemaker," Richard said, pouring more wine for Arthur. "It's really her ceiling, you know. I try to talk to her about the Nikkei index or the geopolitical shifts in the Baltic, and her eyes just glaze over, like a deer in headlights." "Richard," Isabella warned, her voice low. "Oh, come on, honey." Richard grinned, fueled by the wine in the audience. "Tell them about the time you thought the Dow Jones was a neighbor down the street." The table erupted in laughter. It was a lie. Richard had invented that story a month ago at a cocktail party, and it had gotten a laugh, so now it was part of his repertoire. Isabella gripped her napkin under the table. Her knuckles were white. "I never said that, Richard." "She's modest." Richard winked at Arthur. "But honestly, it's refreshing. I spend all day dealing with intellectuals and sharks. It's nice to come home to someone uncomplicated. Simple pleasures, right?" "There is a dignity in simplicity," Arthur Halloway said slowly, his eyes fixed on Isabella. "Though I must say this sauce is a beurre rouge with a hint of truffle oil, isn't it?" Isabella looked up surprised. "Yes. I used a reduction of shallots and port, finishing it with white truffle." "Sophisticated for a simple girl," Arthur noted. Richard quickly interjected, sensing he was losing control of the narrative. "She watches a lot of cooking shows. Monkey see, monkey do. Anyway, Arthur, about the expansion into the European market." As Richard launched into his rehearsed pitch, Jessica leaned over to Isabella, lowering her voice. "It's so sweet that he takes care of you. I mean, without him, where would you be? Probably waiting tables in some diner, right?" Isabella looked at Jessica. In her mind, she saw the great hall of Kensington Manor, where she had learned to debate philosophy with prime ministers and play chess with grandmasters. She saw the stables where she rode thoroughbreds worth more than this entire subdivision. "I imagine I would survive," Isabella said coolly. "Survive." Richard overheard the word and laughed again. "Bella, you can't even handle a credit card bill without panicking. Let's be real. I'm the anchor here." The dinner progressed, and with every